Hey there, Resume Leslie here, and happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here. I am excited to be here as well. If you're watching, go ahead and click the like button and leave a comment. Let me know that you're here. Let me know where you're watching from. Now that I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with the lives, I'm going to try and be a little more interactive in the chat as I can, and make sure that I'm answering any questions that may come up. And if I don't get the chance to answer them in the live, I'll definitely follow up and answer them afterwards. If you are catching the replay, leave me a comment and say replay. Let me know that you're catching the replay. I always like to go back and see who's been watching, who's been catching up. I want to make sure that all the content that I put out is exactly what you need. On that note, let's go ahead and dive right into what we're going to talk about today, which is 3 big changes in job search and careers for 2021. So last week, I talked to you about different areas of your job search to focus on. And the live before that, I talked to you about how to really prep for job search success. Today, I want to talk to you about the 3 big changes that are coming up or that have been starting to sort of take shape so that you can make sure that as you're making these plans, as you're getting prepared for success in 2021, that you're keeping some of these changes in mind. So the first change that I want to talk to you about has to do with resumes, and it's the fact that resume graphics, visuals, and colors are all really starting to be more and more common and more of a necessity. And I will be the first one to admit that I have dragged my feet on this topic for a long time. I'm very much a traditionalist. And as applicant tracking systems have come up, it was obvious that a lot of different graphics weren't ATS friendly. So it was okay to kind of say, hey, the graphics really don't need to be in there unless you're in a really creative graphic visual kind of field. Now, as applicant tracking systems are getting more sophisticated and as people are figuring out workarounds to make visual resumes still be ATS friendly, that's what we're moving into. And really, we're seeing a lot more of that. So the important thing when you're talking about graphics, colors, visuals in your resume is that you're thinking about the online applicant tracking systems. So I know I've explained and described applicant tracking systems before, so I won't really go into it this time, but the important thing is to know that certain elements within your document may not be read very well by certain applicant tracking systems. So some things to know are things that work pretty all right and things that don't. That way you can kind of figure out the best way to move forward with your resume. So first, let's talk about the things that work pretty well, fine in all applicant tracking systems. Text colors or colored text, that works pretty well in all applicant tracking systems. It's not really going to mess up anything about the way that your text or your content comes across. So having colored text is fine. I would say don't overdo it. Be very sort of conscious about when and how you're using those colors, but typically colors for text is fine. Inserted shapes or lines that are there simply for decorative purposes and that don't have any words in them or anything like that. They're simply there for decorative. Those tend to do all right as well. Basically, the applicant tracking system just doesn't see them at all. So it's great because so long as all of your content is there in text for the applicant tracking system to read, the visual elements will only be there for the human readers after it gets through the applicant tracking system, or if you're sending to someone directly and not having to use an ATS. Another thing that can work fine is images. Now, the thing that I will tell you about images, number one, if your images have any sort of text as a part of the image, that's not going to get read. Number two, if your image within your document has an alt text line, that actually may mess up the way it's read in applicant tracking systems. So alt text is actually a really cool tool for inclusivity and making sure that people who have visual impairments are still able to understand the element on the page. However, with a resume and for applicant tracking systems, you want to turn off that alt text, delete the alt text, or mark the image as decorative. that will make sure that the applicant tracking system doesn't see the alt text and try to insert it somewhere within the resume and kind of mess up the rest of your content. So if you're going to include images, make sure that you mark them as decorative or otherwise take away the alt text so that it doesn't get confused with your actual content. Again, same as with inserted shapes, decorative lines, things like that. If you do it the right way, the applicant tracking system won't even see the image at all. And so long as all of your content is there in text, then everything should work well. All right. Taking a look at some people who are here. Scott, it's good to see you. Thank you so much. Candace, thank you very much for leaving me a message. Glad to see you. Moving further through what works and doesn't work with your visuals and graphics in your resume. A couple of things that don't work, tables and graphs. That's something that still, if it's a Word doc table or a graph, the content there can really get confused with your content in your resume. So you want to make sure to either stay away from those or get really creative about how you include those. And there's a lot to talk about with that. I will just let you know that you can't default to tables or graphs or even text boxes within your Word document because they get messed up in the way they get read in the applicant tracking system. A couple of things to consider on this note before we move on. When you are talking about colors, colors in your visuals, colors in your text, you want to consider the industry that you're in, and you want to consider the meaning behind some of these colors. There's a lot of internet research that you can do to just kind of understand the meanings behind blue or orange or green or red and understand if that fits with your professional brand or not, if it fits with your industry or not. Another thing to consider by job type or industry is really how much color or graphics you use. In a lot of professions, you still want to sort of stick to the more conservative side of things. Don't overdo it. In other industries, professions, job types, it may be important to really show off what you have to offer as far as your graphic design abilities or the way that you put colors together or anything like that. So it really depends person to person what you should use, how much you should use, and what's most important to showcase. So you want to use these colors, these graphics to showcase your most important things. You don't just want to put them in there because that's what you think needs to happen. You want to always design with your reader in mind and make sure that anything that's in the resume, content, text, graphics, whatever, is meant to make their job easier. Okay, so that is what's sort of new and trending and really rolling in resumes as far as it comes to job search. Moving on to something a little bit more broad in the job search, and this is a topic that I just think is really, really great. So in the job search, what we're seeing more and more of is that companies are hiring whole humans. So what that means is that they're looking at more than just the text on the page. They're looking at more than just what your background experience is, what your education is, what your hard technical skills are. They're really looking at more pieces of the puzzle when it comes to hiring people. Before we get into the details of how that affects parts of your job search, I want to put out a disclaimer and just let you know that this doesn't mean that things are getting less professional in our language or communication when we're job searching. It doesn't mean that it's more acceptable to bring drama or other non-workplace related things into the workplace. But what it does mean is that as a human, sometimes we deal with things that aren't work related. And as a human, sometimes we have things to offer and value to bring that isn't work related. And companies are seeing that, and they're seeing that if they take a look at the human as a whole and not just the career part of them, that they are able to hire better people, find better fits, keep people around for longer, and ultimately create a better company culture. So the way that this fits into your job search, it's actually a couple of things. So number one of the things that really has been coming up, especially for 2020, is that gaps in your resume are a little bit less of an issue than they used to be. This really kind of applies to times even before 2020. Companies are just starting to realize that it's acceptable to take time away from work, and sometimes that time away from work can make you as a candidate a better, more valuable person, a better, more valuable professional to hire. So gaps in your resume even before 2020 are starting to be a little bit more acceptable, and especially in 2020. It is one of those rare times when almost the entire country, almost the entire world has kind of been going through similar events and environments all at the same time. So people understand for 2020 more than anything else that it is okay to have gaps in your resume. It doesn't mean that you want to just leave them there and not explain them, but it does mean that with a concise, directed explanation, that is perfectly acceptable, and it's not really going to ding you or count against you, especially if the rest of what you have to offer is really great. Another piece that really has shown that companies are hiring more whole humans is that work-life balance is becoming a more prevalent focus in work cultures. So they're understanding more about family needs or wanting to work remotely or different things like that. Another piece of the puzzle is that cover letters are actually more important in 2020 than they've been in some time. The reason behind that is because with 2020 and the pandemic, so many pieces of the hiring process have become remote that it is more difficult for hiring managers and decision makers to get a personal feel for who that person is. But the cover letter is a place where a little bit more personality can come across. This was something that I saw just a couple of weeks ago on social media. I was able to find the survey for it, and it looks like they surveyed about 335 recruiters and were able to find that, if anything, more recruiters are more likely to read cover letters this year than they have been in the past. So that was something really interesting. And I know that it's always a question, do I need a cover letter? Is it important? The answer is always yes. And in 2020 and moving forward, I would say even more so. The last piece of how companies hiring whole humans is really coming into play is that diversity, equity, and inclusion are becoming much more of a focus in the workplace and in workplace culture. And I, for one, am a huge supporter of this. I'm a huge supporter of the idea that people should be able to be diverse and to be themselves in the workplace, and that more diversity leads to better improvement, leads to better performance. It just leads to an overall better environment and a better company. One of the people that I actually saw just recently step into this space in a really big way is Madison Butler. If you don't follow her, she's a former recruiter who is a big advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. She just recently started her own website, bluehairedunicorn.com. And on her website, it says that her focus is around creating equitable spaces, talent, people development, and onboarding, and that she's an outspoken advocate for diversity, belonging, and the ability to be human at work. I wanted to make sure to get that right. That came straight from her website. The reason that I think it's important to point out that a former recruiter is getting into that, number one, is just to show that recruiters are humans too, and they think that these things are important. And number two, to point out that it's even possible for someone to branch into their own space to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. That's so impressive and incredible. And DEI just wasn't as much of a focus even a few years ago that someone may have been able to do that. So the reason that I bring her up, the reason that I bring up this topic is actually twofold. Number one, this relates to your job search, because it means that if you have felt at some point in your career, maybe at many points in your career, that something about you or your diversity was not welcome, you have a right to expect better from your employer. Now more than ever, there is social support. There is broad-ranging support in the US for more diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And if your company isn't fulfilling that for you, you can find another one that will. I promise you, there are companies out there that are putting this at the forefront and really want to make the workplace a more equitable, inclusive place to be. Number two, for your job search, it means that if you are someone who values diversity, equity, and inclusion, like Madison Butler or anyone else that's currently working in that space, if you feel like that kind of work could mean something to you, there are more job opportunities out there in that area than ever before. So I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, and probably my favorite part about the fact that companies are really open to hiring whole humans. Okay, thank you, Andy, for the shout out to Madison Butler. That's fantastic. The last piece of the puzzle, guys, in big trending changes that are coming through in the job search is about professionals taking more personal accountability. And this is being seen in job seekers as well as employed professionals. This was something that I found this week. Actually, I got it through an email list from HR Today, which, sidebar, I know I talk about cultivating your network a lot. If you are not on some good email lists of people who are either in the recruitment space, the HR space, the career coaching space, resume writing, any of that, hop on some email lists. This is really important, and it's stuff where you can cultivate what you see in your email box to make sure that it's helpful to you. On that note, I'll just real quickly bring it out and say, I have an email list too. You can join my email list at resumeleslie.com/resume-plan. It's right there on your screen. So be sure to check that out. Okay, so talking about job seekers and professionals taking more personal accountability. In the email that I got from HR Today, they included an article from Cornerstone On Demand that talked about this fact, this concept, this idea. And what it said that what job seekers and even employed professionals are taking a look at their own skills. They're taking skills assessments and behavioral assessments so that they can see what natural sort of inclinations they have and what value they bring to the table. They're even going so far as to take additional trainings to help up their soft skills, transferable skills, their hard skills, technical skills. And I know that in a lot of situations, these trainings may be paid trainings, and a lot of people in whatever situation you're in, that may not be financially feasible for you, but there are lots of free trainings out there as well. And I encourage anyone who is struggling in their job search or who wants to make sure that you're really elevating yourself and putting yourself ahead of the competition to go out there and look for training. If you're looking for free trainings, you can do something as simple as Google free training for your career. You don't even have to switch what your career is. You can just Google free training for your career. I actually did that yesterday. I found a lot of good resources, and you can from there evolve what it is that you're putting into the search results and find something that really works for you. Assessments are the same thing. There are certainly free personality assessments, behavioral assessments out there. There are also paid ones. Certainly Myers-Briggs is one that's well known. DISC assessments, Colby, Predictive Index, those are all well-known assessments that are out there, but you can certainly find free ones as well. And it's just about, number one, you being able to pinpoint and recognize what you have to offer. And then number two, figuring out where either you want to improve certain things, or at least figure out how to communicate what it is that you have to offer, so that as you're going through your job search, or as you're looking for your next new job, or being promoted or anything like that, that you can directly speak to your value and how you're a benefit to your employer. All right, that is it. So we talked about 3 big changes in job search and careers for 2021. We talked about the fact that for resumes, colors and visuals and graphics are really starting to come more into the picture. We talked about how for the job search, companies are looking to really hire whole humans and all the different ways that affects your job search. And then we talked about how you can take more personal accountability and make sure you're staying ahead of the competition with assessments and trainings that you might be able to get or get involved with to help you improve what you have to offer. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. Again, you can join my email list at resumeleslie.com/resume-plan. It is right there on your screen. You will also, when you sign up, you'll also get access to my 5-step resume writing action plan to write an interview getting resume. And you'll get weekly emails from me with awesome job search tips, advice, all of that good stuff. If you are catching me somewhere other than LinkedIn, I encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn. Just search Resume Leslie on LinkedIn. You'll find me. That is where I am most active. That is where I'm putting out the most free content. And I am looking forward to seeing you either on my email list or over on LinkedIn, or at the very least next week live. Thank you so much. Have a great day. I'll see you soon.